They say the forest keeps its secrets, but I know the truth. My brother went into the storm, and something else came back. It wears his face, but it's not him. It's hungry, and it's watching us. The Wendigo. I never thought I'd be the kind of person to sit down and tell strangers about something like this. But the truth is, I can't keep it inside anymore. It's like it festers if I don't let it out. Like rot under the skin. It's about my brother. We grew up in northern Minnesota on the edge of a forest that felt endless. Our parents' house was small, plain, with a wood stove that never seemed to hold enough heat. Winters there weren't just cold, they were cruel. Wind that howled like it had teeth, snowdrifts that swallowed whole cars. My brother, Nathan, was always tougher than me. He loved the woods. He'd take his rifle and disappear for hours, hunting or just exploring. Coming home with his clothes stiff from ice and his face red with cold. I hated it out there. The silence. The way the trees seemed to lean in when you were alone. But for him, the forest was freedom. For me, it was a place where you didn't belong after dark. The night it all began, I was 22. Nathan was 24. It was late January, and the power had gone out in a storm. We were holed up in the old house, wrapped in blankets. The only light coming from the oil lamps Dad insisted on keeping for emergencies. The wind was pounding against the walls like it wanted inside. Nathan was restless. He kept pacing, muttering that something was calling him. I thought he was just stir-crazy. Cabin fever was a real thing out there. But then, just before midnight, he opened the door and walked out into the blizzard. I shouted after him, but my voice was swallowed by the wind. I didn't follow. God help me, I didn't follow. Hours later, when the storm finally eased, I went looking. His footprints went deep into the trees, and I swear to you, about 100 yards in, they just stopped. No sign of him, no blood, no struggle, just gone. When he came back 3 days later, he wasn't my brother anymore. And that's when I first learned the word Wendigo. The return. 3 days. That's how long he was gone. By the second day, Dad was talking about calling the sheriff. Mom was sitting at the kitchen table with her rosary, whispering prayers under her breath, like she used to when we were kids, and storms rattled the windows. I couldn't sit still. I kept looking out at the woods, at the place where Nathan's footprints had vanished, trying to make sense of it. I didn't sleep much. When I did, I dreamed of him, standing at the tree line, face hidden in shadow, his body stiff like a scarecrow swaying in the wind. I'd wake up with frost on the inside of the window and the sound of scratching, though when I checked, nothing was there. On the third night, just before dawn, we heard the front door creak open. Nathan walked in. He wasn't bundled in his coat anymore. His clothes were damp, clinging to him, but not snow-soaked the way you'd expect. His boots left no puddle on the floor. He didn't track mud, didn't shiver. He just stood in the doorway, looking at us like he'd never left. Mom gasped. Dad demanded to know where he'd been. I just stared. There was something off in his eyes. That's what struck me first. Nathan had always been sharp-eyed, quick to laugh, the kind of guy who looked alive even when he was dead tired. But now his eyes seemed hollow. Not just tired, not just hungry, hollow. Like there was more space inside him than there should have been. When he spoke, his voice was dry, rasping, like his throat hadn't touched water in years. "I got lost," he said. That was it. No explanation, no apology, nothing. Just those 3 words. He sat down at the table, right across from Mom, and asked for food. Not politely, not with a joke the way Nathan always did, but with a heavy certainty, like eating was the only thing in the world that mattered. Mom made him a plate. He ate fast, tearing at the meat, gnawing the bones. I could hear the crunch of cartilage between his teeth. I wanted to tell him to stop, but I didn't, because the whole time, he never looked down at his plate. He just stared at me. The first night. That night, after Nathan came back, the house felt crowded, like the walls were bending inward, like the rooms were too small for all of us. He didn't say much after eating, just sat there, picking at the wood grain of the table with his fingernail. Mom tried to fuss over him, asking if he was warm enough, if he needed dry clothes. Dad kept pressing for answers, where he'd gone, what happened. But Nathan only repeated the same thing in that rasping, hollow voice. "I got lost." When he finally stood, he didn't go upstairs to his old room. He walked to the window that looked out over the tree line, just stood there, staring. His reflection was pale in the glass, washed in the glow of the oil lamp. I don't know how long he stayed like that, long enough that Mom eventually whispered a prayer under her breath and went to bed. Dad followed, but I stayed in the kitchen, watching him. I don't know what I was waiting for. Maybe for him to move, maybe for him to turn and laugh and say it was all some big joke. But he didn't. He just kept staring at the trees, breathing slow, steady breaths that didn't fog up the glass. When I finally went upstairs, I left him there. But sleep didn't come, not with the sound. Somewhere past midnight, I woke to it, the creak of the stairs. Slow, careful, a foot dragging against wood. Then silence. I held my breath, waited. Minutes passed, maybe longer. Then I heard it again. Not the stairs this time, the hallway. A shuffle, bare feet dragging against the floorboards. I turned toward my door. My stomach dropped. The handle was moving. It turned once, stopped, then slowly turned back. And then nothing. Just silence so heavy it made my ears ring. I didn't sleep after that. I lay there until the gray of morning seeped through the window. The handle still burned into my vision. When I finally opened my door, the hallway was empty. Nathan's footprints were pressed into the dust on the floorboards, leading right to my door, and then away again. Hunger. The next day, Nathan barely spoke. He sat at the table most of the morning watching Mom cook, his eyes following every movement of her hands as she cut vegetables, stirred broth, sliced bread. He didn't blink much, didn't shift in his chair, just sat there, breathing slow, steady breaths. When Dad finally snapped and told him to get some rest, Nathan looked at him with this strange tilt of his head, like a dog hearing a sound you couldn't. His lips pulled back into something that might have been a smile, but it showed too much teeth. "I'm not tired," he rasped. He ate again, almost an entire pot of stew by himself. I watched him crack bones, sucking the marrow. Mom tried to laugh it off. "Guess the woods built up your appetite." but her hand was shaking as she said it. That night, it got worse. I woke to a noise outside my door again. Not the handle this time, a sound lower to the ground, scraping, like nails dragged across the wood. I sat up, heart pounding, staring at the shadow that stretched under the gap of my door. It moved slowly, back and forth, as though Nathan was on his hands and knees, tracing the floor with his fingers. I whispered his name, too soft to carry. The shadow stilled, and then something pressed against the door, not knocking, just leaning. The wood groaned under the weight of it. I held still, clutching the blanket to my chest, afraid even to breathe. Minutes passed like hours. Then, just as slowly as it had come, the weight lifted. In the silence that followed, I heard him move down the hallway into our parents' room. The door creaked, and then laughter, low, rasping, not quite human. By morning, no one spoke of it. Mom's face was pale, Dad's eyes were bloodshot. And Nathan sat at the table again, chewing slowly and licking his fingers clean. Pretending. We didn't talk about the noises. Not the dragging on the floor. Not the laughter in the dark. The unspoken rule became, pretend everything was fine. Mom clung to it the hardest. She cooked constantly, as if filling the house with warmth and the smell of bread could drown out the unease. She kept her rosary in her pocket now, fingers brushing it while she moved. Dad buried himself in chores, splitting wood, fixing things that didn't need fixing. Anything to stay busy. And me, I just watched Nathan. He spent most of his time at the window, always the same one, facing the woods. Sometimes I'd catch him whispering, lips moving soundlessly, eyes fixed on the trees. Once, I thought I saw something move out there, tall, pale, shifting between the branches. But when I blinked, it was gone. At night, I locked my door. One morning, I came down to find Mom in tears. A deer carcass was on the porch. Its chest cavity was torn open, ribs snapped wide. No gunshot, no knife wound, just raw, ragged tearing. Dad muttered it must have been wolves. But Nathan was smiling. "Meat's meat," he rasped. He dragged the carcass inside before anyone could stop him. I'll never forget the way he carved into it. Fast, practiced, like he'd done it 100 times before. His hands were steady, but there was a hunger in him. Something restless, gnawing. He ate the raw scraps that clung to the ribs, chewing slow, his eyes rolling back, as if savoring it. I thought Mom would scream, or Dad would throw him out. But they didn't. They just turned away. We were all pretending it was still Nathan. Pretending we could keep this house normal if we ignored the rot festering in the middle of it. But you can only pretend so long. and the woods were calling louder every night. The antlers. That night I couldn't sleep. The house was too quiet. The kind of quiet that presses against your skull until you think you'll scream. I sat at my window, staring out at the black line of trees, their tops swaying in the winter wind. And then I saw it. At first, I thought it was Nathan, a tall figure at the edge of the forest, half hidden by the snow. But it was too still, too tall. The longer I stared, the clearer it became. It wasn't just a figure. It had antlers, dark, branching, rising like jagged arms into the air. They caught the moonlight in sharp edges, and for one breathless moment, I swore the antlers turned, like they were reaching toward me. I shut the curtain, hard, but I couldn't stop thinking about a story I'd heard as a kid. Around the fire, in hushed voices, the old hunters talked about it. A spirit that lived in the woods, born from hunger, wearing the skin of men. A Wendigo. They said it could mimic voices, lure you deeper into the trees. They said it was never satisfied, not even after it fed. I remembered the way Nathan's footprints had stopped in the snow, the way his eyes looked empty now, like something else was staring out through them. For a few minutes, I believed it. I believed the story was real, that I'd seen it with my own eyes. But then, I told myself it was nonsense, just an old folktale. Shadows and snow playing tricks. I went back to bed, forcing the blanket over my head, forcing myself not to think about the shape at the tree line. When I finally drifted off, I dreamed of antlers scraping across the roof. And when I woke at dawn, there were scratches on the window frame, long, deep, as if something had tried to claw its way inside. But no one spoke of it at breakfast. We were still pretending. Into the woods. It was just past midnight when I heard the door open. I crept to the landing, peering down, heart hammering. Nathan was there, standing in the threshold, and with him was a boy from town, Eli, the neighbor's kid, no more than 15. He must have come looking for help with something, or maybe Nathan had lured him. I'll never know. Nathan's voice was low, rasping, almost kind. "Come with me, I'll show you." And Eli followed. They stepped into the snow, heading toward the trees, and I knew, trembling breath, I knew I couldn't just let it happen. So I pulled on my boots, my coat, and I followed, quiet as I could, keeping my distance. The woods swallowed us whole. Every sound was sharper, the crunch of snow, the groan of branches, the wheeze of my own breath. Ahead of me I saw their lantern glow bobbing through the pines. Then it stopped. I crept closer, hid behind a fallen log, and that's when I saw it. Nathan turned to the boy, but his body shifted, bones stretching, cracking, his spine arching until his frame towered unnaturally tall. His skin pulled tight, gray and thin as paper, his face elongated, jaw opening wider than it should, teeth jagged, yellow, endless, and rising from his skull, antlers. Long, twisted, branching shadows that tangled with the trees themselves. His voice came out wrong now, layered, like two mouths speaking at once. "You'll do." Eli didn't even scream before Nathan lunged. The sound, God, the sound of bones snapping, flesh tearing. Eli's cries cut short with a wet gurgle. Blood steamed in the snow, and Nathan, no, the Wendigo, gnawed, tearing hunks of meat with a hunger that shook the trees. Scared, I couldn't move, I couldn't breathe. But he didn't see me, not then. I backed away, step by step, until the lantern glow was swallowed by the dark, until the forest spat me back out at the edge of the yard, my lungs burning, my body trembling like it wasn't mine anymore. I shut the door behind me and slid to the floor, shaking, my hands slick with sweat. Eli was gone, devoured, and Nathan, my brother, was something else entirely now. I didn't know how to tell anyone. I still don't, because the truth sounds insane, and the thing in the woods still wears his face. The warning. By morning, word had already spread. Eli never came home. His parents were frantic. The sheriff's truck parked at their house all day. Neighbors stomping through the snow with lanterns, calling his name into the trees. Our house was quiet. Too quiet. Mom and Dad watched from the window but said nothing, pretending, always pretending. But I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it again. The way Nathan's body stretched, the crack of Eli's bones between his teeth. I wanted to scream it into the air, to tell the searchers not to waste their time, to confess what I'd seen. That night, I tried to write it down, just to get it out, a confession in the pages of my journal. My hands shook as I wrote his name, Eli's name, the word Wendigo scratched out in frantic letters. And that's when I heard it. A breath. I froze, slowly lifted my head. Nathan was in the doorway. His eyes caught the lamplight, black and bottomless, his mouth curled into a grin that was too wide, too sharp. He stepped into the room, slow and deliberate, and I swear I smelled blood before he even spoke. You followed me. It wasn't a question. His voice was deeper now, guttural, vibrating in the walls. I couldn't answer, couldn't move. He leaned close, so close I felt his breath on my face, hot and rancid. I could smell you. My stomach turned. He inhaled deeply, lips parting in something between a smile and a snarl. You smell like fear. My pen slipped from my hand. Nathan glanced at the journal, then back at me, his grin vanishing. His face hardened, eyes narrowing into something sharp and cruel. If you speak, he rasped, voice low, almost a growl, I'll make sure they never find what's left of you. Desperate whisper, do you understand? I nodded. I couldn't do anything else. For a moment, he stayed there, crouched in the lamplight, breathing me in. Then he stood, silent as smoke, and slipped back into the hallway. The journal page was still in front of me. I tore it out, crumpled it, shoved it into the stove, and watched it burn. Outside, the searchers' lanterns still bobbed in the dark, their voices fading into the woods. They would never find Eli, and Nathan knew I would never tell them why. The Alibi. The sheriff came to the house 2 days later. He wasn't alone. 2 deputies followed, their boots heavy on the porch, their faces grim. The whole town was being questioned, every door, every family. Nathan greeted them first. He smiled, shook hands, even clapped the sheriff on the shoulder like they were old friends. His voice was smooth now, not rasping, not hollow, like he'd slipped on the skin of the man he used to be. I can't tell you how sorry I am, he said. Eli was a good kid. I hope you find him soon. Polite, charming, almost glowing with sympathy. The sheriff asked his questions. Where had we been? What had we seen? Had anyone noticed strange tracks in the snow? Nathan answered easily, leaning back in his chair, every word calm and steady. He was the best version of himself, the son every parent wanted, the neighbor everyone trusted. Then the sheriff turned to me. Where were you that night? My throat closed, my mouth went dry. Before I could speak, Nathan laid a hand on my shoulder, warm and heavy. We were together, he said smoothly, sitting at the kitchen table, talking. The sheriff looked at me, waiting, and I nodded. Yes, that's right.
The deputies wrote it down. The sheriff thanked us. They left. The silence afterward was unbearable. Nathan stretched, smiling faintly, and went upstairs as though nothing had happened. But when I looked at my parents, their faces were pale, hollow, because they knew. That night, the night Eli vanished, I hadn't been at the kitchen table. I'd been in my room, listening to Nathan move through the hallway. And they'd been in their room, lying awake, hearing the same thing. We hadn't been together, not at all. And now my parents knew it too.
The last night. It broke the silence at last. Dad. He was the one who spoke first. After the sheriff's visit, after the alibi that hung over us like smoke, he sat at the kitchen table long into the night, fists clenched, eyes hollow. When Nathan came downstairs, whistling softly, Dad stood. "You're not my son," he said. The words landed like a gunshot. Mom flinched, covering her mouth. I couldn't breathe. Nathan froze in the doorway, head tilted, that polite smile still painted across his face. But it didn't reach his eyes. Not anymore. "Don't say that," he rasped. His voice was cracking, that smooth mask peeling away. "Don't say it. You're not Nathan." Dad's voice was steady now, trembling with grief, but firm with truth. "Whatever you are, you're not him." For a moment, silence. Then the smile dropped. Nathan's frame twisted, rising, his skin tightening over bone. His shadow stretched tall on the wall, antlers scraping the ceiling. His teeth glinted in the lamplight, his voice layered and guttural, terrified. "I am your son," Mom sobbed, whispering prayers, clutching her rosary until her knuckles went white. I thought he would strike then, tear us apart like he had Eli. My chest locked, waiting for it, but instead, he stepped back. His black eyes flicked to each of us. Dad standing firm, Mom trembling in her chair, me frozen with fear. His breath came ragged, hungry, but his hands stayed at his sides. And then, without a word, he turned. He walked to the door, opened it. The winter wind howled inside, carrying the scent of pine and blood. For the last time, he looked at us, his face shifting between the brother I knew and the creature he had become. And then he was gone. The trees swallowed him, the antlers fading into the dark. We never saw him again. But some nights, when the wind screams against the house and the forest groans like it's alive, I swear I hear him. That rasping voice carried on the air, whispers broken, "Don't forget me." The hunger and the blood. I couldn't leave it alone. After Nathan vanished into the woods, I thought maybe the silence would heal. That if I buried it deep enough, life would eventually smooth over the cracks. But the truth sat heavy in me. It gnawed the way hunger gnaws. So I read. I hunted every scrap of folklore I could find. Books on Algonquin legends, field journals from missionaries, brittle pages from anthropologists who'd lived among tribes that still whispered the word Wendigo. Most of the stories were fragments, warnings carried through centuries. A curse born from hunger in the deep winter, when survival twisted into something unholy. Men who tasted human flesh were taken, hollowed out by greed until the forest claimed them. Their bodies stretched, starved, their hearts frozen, their souls gone. But there was something else, something almost buried. One elder's account said the Wendigo was not simply hunger, it was betrayal. It was taking from your own. That was what sealed a transformation, feeding on the blood of kin or destroying what you were meant to protect. That was the line Nathan never crossed. The boy from town, Eli, he was fair game, a stranger, But us? His blood recognized ours. We were the anchor he couldn't sever, the last shred of the man he had been. That was why he didn't harm us. Not mercy, not love, just law. The oldest law of the curse. A Wendigo can devour the world, but never its own blood. That's why he left. That's why the forest took him instead of the house. But the books never said what happens when a Wendigo denies itself that last piece. Does it starve? Does it rage until the trees fall silent? Or does it wait? Sometimes late at night I wonder if Nathan isn't gone at all, if he's still out there, circling, growing hungrier every winter, and if one day the law will break and the hunger will come home.